Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And this week I have one of my regulars on that is always a treat to talk to. She's always into something different. Julie Esty is a friend of mine from not only from the medical colleges where we met, we both get to play a variety of ailments so that students can learn. But she is a person with many talents. She crochets, she does all kinds of amazing things, and we will be talking about her dearly departed players that will be doing the Dunmore Cemetery Tour. It's an annual event every year in Dunmore, in Pennsylvania, and people come out by the droves. I'm telling you, I've been to it. It's amazing, and it's in a cemetery, which we've talked before with Julie about how it should be normalized that people should kind of go there. It's a peaceful place, really cool place to be, of course, respectful, but also to be enjoyed. But we're going to start the conversation with a book that Julie just published called The Center Street Murders. Now, for all those people out there, like my friend Kristen, who doesn't listen to my podcast because she only likes murder, true crime podcasts, maybe she'll be curious about this week because of the murders in Scranton. So let's get started with the conversation. Hey, Julie, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Oh, good. Now that we won't reveal too much, but Julie and I just had an off recording bitch session where we were trying to right the wrongs of the world, and there are so many. We were just too tired. We said, screw it, we're going to get to our conversation instead. But we're good, right, Julie?
Yep.
So you just now you are, I should let people know that you're like, I consider you to be a local historian. You're here in Scranton. You know a lot about the local history, not just Scranton, but Lackawanna County. And a lot of that plays out in your tour in Dunmore. But let's start talking about first, and I don't want you to give anything too much away, but you just published a book called Center Street Murders. And I know you told me about it a couple months ago. You piqued my interest or curiosity about these women who were murdered in Scranton. Tell me how this came about for you, first of all, how you even heard about these women. And then give us a little bit of the story about what that's about without giving it all away, because we want people to buy the book.
The way it came about was a bunch of roads meeting at one point. About 17 years ago, when I first started the Dunmore Cemetery tour. Of course, I didn't have any money, which I still don't have any money to do the tours, but I would sit and roll microfilm in the library looking for candidates for the tour. And then, of course, you have to think about how you're going to costume them when you have a budget of zero. And as I was scrolling microfilm one night, I saw an article about a woman who was at the train station in the early 1900s. She was dressed in men's clothes and she was taken away by the police because she was dressed in men's clothes and they considered her to be drunk. Well, I thought, well, you know what? I wonder what she was doing. Like, why was she dressed in men's clothes? That's awful early there in the early 1900s. And there was no name for her. And it would have been easy to costume because suits are a dime a dozen at the Salvation Army. But since I couldn't figure out who she was at that point, there was really nothing I could do about it. I saved the incident for a while and then I threw it away like all my gum wrappers and, you know, paper plates and whatever I scrawl stuff on. But I never forgot that woman. I always wondered in the back of my head who she was and what was she doing because it just didn't make any sense. That was like not a normal occurrence. So time goes on, and I ended up writing a bunch of books. And a few years ago, I wrote a book called Murder in Scranton, where I address four murders in three stories. And one of the stories was about the murder of two different women between 1902 and 1904 who were bludgeoned about the head and found pretty much just abandoned. After I did that, well, I shouldn't say after I did it. When I wrote the afterword for that, it occurred to me how inadequate, and it wasn't their fault, it was just the time, how inadequate the police were at that time. And again, it's not their fault. They don't have everything that we have today. They really, really could not have solved those crimes. They tried and they pinned it on a guy, but I don't really believe that the guy they pinned it on was the guy who did it for a number of reasons. And it occurred to me how easy it would have been for somebody to kill multiple women in this area, in that, or any area at that time. And then I found these two women in Center Street, downtown. They're bludgeoned about the head, died horrific deaths. They're in that time frame. So as I searched and followed their murder, and of course you just can't read what happened in the year or whatever that's going on right then when this happens, I had to follow it for years, almost another decade into the future. And lo and behold, here comes the woman in the suit from the train station.
Oh,
All
wow.
these years later, and now I have the tools to figure out who she is. She's got a story to tell, and I have the tools to track her and find out that what this woman is saying very well could be true. And she claimed she was living with a man who was a murderer. He went on to murder a woman in New York State, but they were living two doors away from the two women who were axe murdered.
Hmm.
So if you've got a guy who ends up being an executed murder for murdering a woman in another state, and he was living two doors away
Hmm.
from these women who were axe murdered, not only that, with the job he had, it doesn't even have to be his job. He was 2 blocks away from one of the women in Murder of Scranton when she left work every night. And he was a taxi driver for the train station, which put him about 4 blocks away from where the other woman was found.
Oh, wow.
So now you've got somebody in this whole scheme, a man who ended up committing suicide was blamed for it. Well, that's a convenient excuse. He's not around to defend himself.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the police don't have what we have today to solve these murders. Now, I'm not saying that I've solved it. I am just throwing out a very good possibility that maybe the man who was accused of it, who was dead and couldn't defend himself, isn't the man who did it. Maybe it was the neighbor 2 doors away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you figure too, they probably wanted to set people's minds at ease. So if the murderer is caught, then oh, everything's fine and dandy, right?
Exactly, exactly. And this is what they keep saying in the newspaper. We're going to catch him and we caught him and blah, 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 blah. And everything is great. And as I'm researching this, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, but wait, it's not two women. It's not two women. It's four women. And all of a sudden I find this little blurb where somebody unknown, anonymously, wrote into the newspaper and said the same thing that I was saying. It's not two women. It's four. There's more than just these two. They all have the same kind of injuries. Like, you got a guy living 2 doors away here who did bad things. But the thing is, this woman in the men's clothes, when the guy goes on his little spree, he leaves this area and he goes on he kills in another state. And this woman now who was married to him comes forward and tells the police, 5 years ago, I was living with him 2 doors away from these women. And the police are like, well, we'll send somebody up there to question him. So they do. The guy is going to be executed for murder. And they send a police officer up to question him. And they say, did you kill these women? What do you think he's going to say?
No.
He's not going to say he did it. So they believed him over this woman at the train station. So I'm not just talking, I guess in the whole scheme of things, like I'm really not just talking about a murder here and the possibility that something other could have happened. I'm kind of making a statement here. Somebody really needed to believe that woman. They said she couldn't have been. I found her marriage license. There were spelling errors all over it. No wonder nobody could find it. I mean, you have to sit here till the wee hours of the morning, like me, the nerd. I'm like those guys. Do you remember the X-Files? And there were those three guys that were in this room that you really never saw, and they were like the
Yeah.
nerds. That's me in the wee hours of the morning. And I actually found it. And it's like, oh my God, she wasn't lying. She was telling the truth. Now, granted, the name is different. His name is different, but people lied all the time. People still lie all the time. They lie about their age. People lied about their ages on marriage license. It would have been so simple because we didn't have all the avenues we have now to check people, to investigate crimes. So I'm not saying that I know what happened, and this is exact. I am tossing out a possibility and making a statement. Another statement I'm trying to make is if these women had been of another social class, maybe a little bit more would have been done for them. These last two women were most likely prostitutes. I'm relatively certain they were prostitutes from looking at different records in the archives of the Lackawanna Historical Society. They were ladies of the street. They were addicts. They, of course, they're having all sorts of illicit sex and they're consorting with people who at that time were not deemed to be acceptable.
Mm.
That whole Center Street was just such a mess with drugs and gambling and drinking and prostitution and crime and thievery. Like what was going on in front in the storefronts out in Scranton, which were catering to people who could afford to go shopping there, was all fine and dandy. What was going on in the courts was a whole different story. And it was such a hotbed of activity. Bottom line, the police are not equipped to take care of this. This is too less.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
I'm arguing for four women who maybe got a bad deal. Actually, five women who got a bad deal because of the time. I mean, number one, the police couldn't handle it. Number two, we were all just a bunch of crazy bitches. You know, this
Yeah.
lady, this lady here at the train station, she didn't know what she's talking about. She had a suit on, I actually don't believe she was drunk. The article said that she was drunk. What she did was she thought that her husband, who she was following, and that's why she was dressed in the suit, spotted her. So she went and she picked up a cigar. What she probably did was inhaled it. She was probably sick from smoking the cigar.
Okay. So she was wearing that to kind of disguise herself from her husband. Okay.
Wearing it as a disguise.
Okay. And
Yep.
well, and women still aren't treated equally now. So imagine the early 1900s, like you're saying,
Oh,
they're probably like, oh, this crazy broad, what the hell is
yeah.
she doing? Yeah.
Yeah, just another crazy. And the same thing with these women that were axe murdered. They are living in the dregs. I mean, I'm talking, and if you, and nothing against Scranton, but if you do First Friday and you walk through the courts down there, you can see all these old windows that are still with the bricks around them, and you can see where doors were in the back of these buildings. That's where these folks were living. And you can imagine, like you figure not only is it crime, they don't have modern facilities really. It's not the best. I mean, it's a mess.
Mm, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's just two more women when these two ladies were found. It's just, I mean, the chances that that was ever going to be solved. I mean, they didn't have any, like today, you'd get that guy in with a blood spatter and da 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 da, and well, okay, like here we go, like we're gonna check out the axe thing here for their heads, and they just did not have that technology at that time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people thought nothing of destroying a crime scene. Like
Mm,
like today we would never think, like you see something going on, that's it, we're like we're away, the police will not let you there. I mean, when the first woman was found over by where the Burger King is now over on Luzerne Street, people were traipsing all over that. I mean, it's ghoulish. It's like, why here? But you can even trace that as far back as the Lincoln assassination. Like if a president got assassinated today, that's it. That's sealed down, locked down so fast. I mean, the night that Abraham Lincoln was killed, there were so many people in that box. One guy lost his key in there. He went back. I mean, if I lost my key today on a scene like that, I'd be waiting to get my house key for like 3 years.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're like slipping in blood trying to find things.
Yeah, I know. Like, so crime scenes were destroyed. These women didn't have the best straights going on. I mean, they walk in, they're finding empty beer bottles, they're finding empty morphine bottles right off the bat. Like, do you think that anybody is really going to care?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, and sadly that's not that hasn't changed. I shouldn't say, well, it has a little, but I don't think it's really changed. If you think
No.
about even in modern society, a lot of the serial killers will go after someone who's thought to be less than, that doesn't have someone who's
Yep.
going to fight for them, like a prostitute or a runaway or something. So sadly, that hasn't changed, unfortunately, enough. It hasn't changed enough.
So that's where I am. That's what I've got going on. That's what it is. And again, I'm not saying that I have the definitive answer because nobody at this point is going to have it. Nobody was going to get it between 1902 and 1905. They did not have the capability. But I am tossing out this possibility because this man was in relatively close proximity to all of these women. And now the thought occurred to me one night when I was walking out a party on the patio. I mean, the stuff that goes through my head at the weirdest times is like, I now have the capability to check even further. What would happen if I found somebody in Carbondale or down the line in DuPont or whatever? Because all you had to do was get on a train. You could get on and off anywhere you wanted. And there's no cameras, there's no checking in, there's nobody watching you. You could have been doing anything back then.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and he was a cab driver, you said, right? So he could
Yeah,
be picking
he could have
people up
been
anywhere
anywhere.
and dropping them off
Yeah.
anywhere.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know the one night many, many years ago, back in the 80s, I used to take cabs. And maybe you're a little young. You probably don't remember how they used to have to crank the thing when their fare started. There was like a meter on the dashboard. And it had like a little flag, and they would flip the flag down. I think it was like a flag, okay? And they would do that and they would call in and say when they, to the dispatcher, I'm on my way to, my mother's house when if they were picking me up, like say at Hiles. Well, the one night, like I got in a cab and the guy didn't call in. And I noticed that he didn't crank the meter. And he's like, how would you like a reduced fare? And I said, you know what? You need to call into that dispatcher right now to crank that meter. I mean, so think about it. If somebody wasn't on the ball, and back then, I'm sure back then, you're driving around, it's 1905, it's just not, it's not like it is today.
Hmm.
He could have been driving all over the city and nobody would have known where he was.
Oh,
Could have been,
absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
could have been sitting anywhere watching someone. And the thing that makes this like kind of gels it too is the one woman was found down by the farmer's market. So she, she's leaving the courthouse and, she gets down by the farm, they find her about a block or so away from what we know now is the farmer's market. But the one woman in the Center Street murders who was murdered claimed that a man tried to get her over the Linden Street Bridge. She was picked up by police for doing whatever it was she was doing. And her claim was that somebody was trying to get her over the Linden Street Bridge. Well, for me, that's significant because once you get over that Linden Street Bridge there by the church, St. Mary's, and all of that, you're down in the vicinity heading toward the farmer's market. You're also in a straight line from where the other woman was found.
Mm,
So, like we've kind of got like this little route here. And again, I don't know. I'm just tossing it out there. Something very bad could have been happening here. I mean,
yeah.
the murder of one woman is bad, but when you get a bunch of them, something really, really sinister could have been going on in Scranton.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely possible serial killer there for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did they really know at that point? How many serial killers at that point really had been, it's not like we know them today. You know, Police stations weren't all that connected back then. Yeah, they said, okay, well, yeah, we got Jack the Ripper and we had the Benders out west or whatever, and H.H. Holmes, I think his name is. But you know what? Like, I don't think anybody was really thinking on it on the level that we think on it today.
Hmm. Yeah. How did they end up with the gentleman who had committed suicide? How did they end up pinning it on him? Did they was he supposedly in the vicinity near the women, or what was their reasoning
He
there?
was seen in the bed of one of them, but at the same time, he was also seen in front of his house. So
Hmm.
was he in bed with one of them, or was he over in North Scranton? Like, where was he? And one of the boarding house residents said that it was that he thought it was him. Well, as in the case of one of the ladies in the previous book, rewards are offered. And you've got to realize if you're living down on Center Street, a $500 reward is a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
You can
Hey, I'd like a
really,
$500 reward
yeah,
now.
like a
Sure.
$500 reward
I
today,
could do
too.
a lot of things with $500 now.
But in 1905, okay, so suppose he saw the guy in bed with her and he knew that, well, he goes home, he writes a note. Nobody ever, they say, well, the note kind of says this, but, does anybody have the note? You know, it's easy to pin somebody on something on somebody who can't defend themselves. And
Oh
that's another
yeah.
thing. Maybe there's a family out there who's thinking like their great great uncle axe murdered two fallen angels in a court downtown and committed suicide. Maybe not. In all these years they've been thinking that, and it's just not. Because now I'm showing you that there's a real good possibility that there could have been somebody other. So maybe it's a little bit of redemption for somebody else.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
of course for the poor women who were murdered, it would be nice to get justice for them if it's, I
Yeah,
mean, if there really was a serial killer or whatever. I mean, the truth would be important for them, I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah. Maybe all this one man was guilty of was drinking with and having sex with soiled doves. That's it. Some of Scranton's fallen angels. Murdering them is a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, as we learned from many of the shows that I like to watch, it's like just because you're there and having a party with the person doesn't mean you're the one that,
Doesn't,
did
that's
violence
right.
against them. Yeah. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So, for my listeners who are listening now, how can they get this book that you just came out with if they want to read the whole story?
It is for sale right now at the Library Express at the Steamtown Marketplace. The Lackawanna Historical Society has it. And if they purchase from the Library Express or the Lackawanna Historical Society, a small portion of the proceeds goes to help those organizations. They can get it through me by contacting the Dunmore Cemetery Tour Facebook page by message, or I will have them available on tour days in the cemetery. I have a book signing coming up at the Library Express, and I believe there's going to be a lot of good stuff going on here. So I'll just get it all written here while I'm at it. On Thursday, October 5th, I'll be at the Library Express. On September 30th, there's going to be a really cool local history fair at the mall, the Viewmont Mall,
Oh,
where
neat.
you're gonna have a whole bunch of us from all over the Historical Society, Lackawanna, Carbondale, different local history authors. We're all going to be up there on September 30th doing our thing and gabbing with folks. So I will be there with that. And then if anybody's looking for it as a Christmas stocking stuffer, I'm sure the Historical Society is going to have their holiday emporium again. So, I'm going to be
Oh,
out and about, but the big days to get it really are the Dunmore Cemetery tour days on October 1st and 8th.
okay, awesome. So you've heard it here, folks. So especially if you're whether you live in Scranton, Lackawanna County, anywhere in Northeast PA, or you come to visit, maybe you come back to visit relatives or you're coming through because you want to see Scranton, home of the office, whatever it is, you heard from Julie there. And that's a perfect transition. So you mentioned October 1st and October 8th. Those are both Sundays at the Dunmore Cemetery Tour, the dearly departed players. Julie has been doing this for a long time, and every year is a little bit different. She's got amazing local folks who portray people and they tell very interesting stories, people who have a really interesting past or something about them that's really unique. So tell me a little bit about what people can expect from this year's tour.
This year's tour is, and I hate to call them normal, but they're normal people. They're regular folks like you and me. We don't have anybody who's famous like, in Colbert and history or anything like that. But they all have interesting things to say. And, of course, everybody has interesting moments in their life, and we touch on those things. But some of them have some really interesting words of advice for us going forward. And it's interesting how some of their lives relate to a lot of the things that are going on now. I do believe that there is a very good chance at this moment that we are going to have one of our players emerge from a mausoleum, which has never happened before. A
Ooh.
family, I'm hearing that a family is giving us permission and they're going to unlock the door and let one of our players come out of a mausoleum. So that's going to be absolutely wonderful. And we do have, I heard from them today, we have a man who is huge in criminal history here. And he, not only is he absolutely huge with the Pennsylvania State Police, he's got a very interesting tie to the Lindbergh kidnapping. And I'm hearing from today that the state police got a hold of me and they are talking about sending out a trooper and a police car on tour days to, do an honor kind of thing for this trooper from the past. So we've got that going on. And, it's just, I have to, honest to God, I have to tell you, like, part of the, part of the reason I do this is my eighth grade history teacher. She was wonderful. And we remained friends throughout her life. And unfortunately, she passed a few years ago, and I miss her something terribly. She was just great. This year, and people have said to me, you need to go out there as her. You just need to go out there and this year I am going out as her. And I
Oh,
don't know
wow.
how I'm going to make it through this talk and not cry because she has some really, really good advice for people in her last educational moment. And it's not that she was just my history teacher, she was a historian here in this valley. She wrote a very defining work on a certain avenue of Northeastern Pennsylvania history. So I get to go out there as my eighth grade history teacher.
Oh, how cool is that? That is really cool. That is wonderful. So we're talking everyday people, but they have words of wisdom that people are going to benefit from.
They did great things. They really did. I mean, we have one guy who volunteered for service in World War One, and he went into World War One, and he did incredible things and was acknowledged by the government in France.
Oh, wow.
Um, who else? Like you know what? When you're in it and you're working on it, like I can't even think about it because it's a whirlwind. And we have the wonderful Sarah Sones from the medical college. She's going to be out there again this year. Sarah does a
Yes.
great job.
I remember
Sarah.
her last year. She did well, I know it was something to do with healthcare and immunizations, I
Yeah,
believe,
and
or something.
I think I actually sent her out there with healthcare again because she's so compassionate. Like she just like she sells it. She sells it.
Hmm.
So we have the wonderful Sarah Sones out there again this year.
That's great. And we should tell people that you can come out to this. And are you still, it's a free event, but you usually collect some kind of donation for some nonprofit. Are you doing that this year or
Nah,
no? Because I,
it's just show up. That's it. Admission's free. Come on out, Gab. We are gonna have mausoleums decorated again this year and different places in the cemetery decorated. Space Time is going to decorate Kappa downtown. Um, Scranton Films. I'm trying to think. We have a bunch of folks that are going to decorate the mausoleums. Of course, I'll be taking care of the Lackawanna Historical Society. I'll be taking care of the receiving vault. So that week between the 1st and the 8th is really nice to go out to the cemetery and see some real. It just it gets a whole different life with all the harvest stuff around, and we're seeing families come in and take pictures, which is really good because from time to time over the years we've heard that kids were afraid of cemeteries or they don't know proper cemetery etiquette. So it's a way for us to reach younger kids and have them come in and learn that, it's okay to come here. You just have to be cool about what you're doing. So,
Yeah.
we're going to have the decorations again. And it's just always a wonderful time. We have a great audience. No, just show up at the gate. It's free. As long as you're behaving, you're cool and follow along and don't step on the grass or whatever. We're cool with whatever.
Good. Yeah. And I know it's a great way. I've gone a few times. I mean, on a nice day, you're out there in the fresh air, you're walking a little bit because you walk along to hear the different stories from the different actors. So you get a little bit of exercise, get your steps in, interact with other people and learn some history, some local history, which is really cool. I thought about you. God, I wish I had saved what I had seen on social media. It was something to do with an event being held in a cemetery somewhere because we spoke about this last year. And I'm probably one of those people. I'm a Gen Xer, but when we were young, we'd hear stories of people like going out drinking or whatever in cemeteries, or we'd hear like a couple people I knew who were more artistic would go out and they would do like with their pencil and their drawing paper, maybe, they would try to, I guess, what do you call it? Like sketch over
The rubbings, yeah.
the rubbings, the sketch rubbings of different things. But I was one of those folks who I was a little bit afraid. A few years ago, the Scranton, they used to do a really cool event every month where they try to like tie in a business, but we ran through the cemetery in Scranton as part of the 5K and it was at night. But I mean, we had people in front of us and I was like following them
Yeah.
so you could see. But I've been one of those people who was kind of a little bit scared. But I know when we spoke I think it was last year, I love what you had to say because it's trying to let people know that they're not scary places and be respectful, but to be out there and enjoy the beauty and enjoy the space that's outdoors.
Yeah. Yeah, they are very community friendly places. They are open air museums. They are a great place to take kids if you want to try and teach them math. You show them a couple stones. Okay, well, you know what? Here's when they were born. Here's when they died. How about if you sit down and like try and subtract this and figure out, how old they were or whatever. Like they are very, very community friendly places. And I hate to say if there was, that there, COVID, that something good came out of COVID but we had to adapt. And that's how we got into, decorating. It's my hope that even though we're just doing the tours and decorating now, that maybe in another year or two, we can get some musicians in there who might want to hang out like and play before the tour starts. It's always been my goal to have somebody in there with a guitar playing the Grateful Dead in the cemetery. But like, when you don't have any funds, it's just, you got to do what you can do. But it's nice to see it evolving and taking on a new direction. And it's nice to hear from people who have had to go in for funerals to say, seeing these decorations when we come in here was such a comfort. In fact, I started decorating the receiving vault for just about every holiday now. And it will
Oh,
be decorated again. Well, it will be decorated for the tour. I believe I'm going to jump out there and do it for Thanksgiving. But the receiving vault and the Lackawanna Historical's George Catlin, they will be decorated beautifully for Christmas. And that is thanks to a very dear friend, Ron from Pink Flamingo. God bless him. Ron's a
oh,
good guy. So,
yeah.
hey, you know what? It's such a little thing. And if it makes people happy, I'm in. I'm having fun. I'm out there. I'll tie stuff to this thing. It's not a problem.
You're game for just about anything, I
Yeah,
think,
I
right,
know,
Julie?
whatever.
Well, and for
Crazy.
people who haven't checked it out, I mean, whether or not you're available on October 1st or 8th, you can always go. I mean, I'm sure I know it closes at a certain time, but go up in the daytime and walk through the Dunmore Cemetery. I've been there for walks. I've gone on runs there, and I mean, there's some hills, so if you want some hill work, you're going to get that in. But it's a very peaceful place. In fact, the one day I think I ventured into a very old part of the cemetery, like in the back there, and I thought, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I almost felt like it was a new world. Like I had gone
yeah.
into a new, I'm like, how far does this go? And can I get lost? But it was pretty cool because it was unexpected. I was like, oh, wow, look at this section of the cemetery. I didn't even know this was here.
Mm-hmm. It's a
That's
great
pretty
place.
cool.
And
Yeah.
good things are happening out there because of the dearly departed players, because of the public, because of people like you helping me, because of Lackawanna County Arts and Culture, we do get a small grant. Good things are happening in the cemetery. Who would have
That's
thought?
great.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like you said, people who have been there for so, maybe funerals, typically, it's a sad time because you're missing your loved one, but here you can come in and maybe have a different memory, where you learn something from history and connect with people and walk and just enjoy the day. So it's an opportunity to really have good memories created there in the Dunmore Cemetery.
The one thing too you have to realize, like part of the reason I ended up in the cemetery was I started photographing out there many, many years ago, but I did work in a hospital. I worked in X-ray, and I was young at the time. It was back in the 80s, and I left my job at the hospital because I was seeing so many people die, and younger. They were younger, a lot. We don't live in the healthiest belt in the United States, and it's just like I can't do this anymore. I've got to jump. So I jumped because I was afraid of death, and look at where I ended up. So the bottom line is we're not escaping it. We are not escaping it. But I stand out there now. And even though I really don't want to go anywhere just yet, I got a lot of stuff I got to do, but I stand out there and I look at it and I think, you know what? They all did it. Every one of the people in this place did it. And they were all cool with it. And when it's my turn, I'm going to jump it and I'm going to be cool with it too. And I'm going to find out what's over on the other side. Right now, the way I'm looking at it with all the musicians going, the party's over there now anyway. I mean, like, we don't have anybody left over here, but yeah, like they all did it. None of them came back. I don't hear any of them complaining about like what they're getting paid or the conditions or the taxes or whatever. They're all happy. They're all cool with where they are, and we're going to be cool with it too.
I'd like to believe that, Julie. I really do. Because I'll tell you what, as I'm getting older now, I'll be 52 in about, a little over 2 weeks. And with my parents, thank God, still alive, but they're, I mean, 86 and 78. I think more about death. And there are
Yeah.
some nights I actually had myself almost having a panic attack about a month or two ago because I'm like, I'm not ready to go yet. I like yourself, I have a lot more that I want to do. And I'm like, but what if this is it? I used to think that I was a weird kid. Sometimes when I was young, I would stare at my bedroom wall and think about that. Like, what if this is it? Like, what if I mean, I like to believe in an afterlife, but it's like, will I be aware of it? Will I be, so I'd like to believe that, Julie, is just what I want to say, because sometimes I have panic attacks thinking about what's
Don't,
after this.
don't.
Yeah.
After all my years in the cemetery, I think there's much more to it. And the secret is to love. As long as you love, then you get a part of you remains. I've seen beautiful things. People always say to me, is the Dunmore Cemetery haunted? No. They say, you see ghosts? No. But I have seen angels. And I think that that's the secret. And I've said it for at least a decade. The secret is to love. And it doesn't matter whether you're a good person or a bad person, like if you committed a crime or whatever. The bottom line is it's love. Love is stronger than death. And you love, I love. Somebody loves you, somebody loves me. So I'm telling you, Janine, there's more to it, and you're going to be cool. I'll see you on the other side.
But not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. I'll be standing. I'm going to go because I'm 10 years older than you. I'll meet you on the other side with a glass of wine. Is it a deal?
Yeah, if you're waiting there with a nice glass of chilled white wine, I'll be like smiling then. Yeah.
And Jim Morrison.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. It'll be a good table conversation for
Yeah,
sure.
why not?
If there are tables, or I don't know. Do things float? Will my wine come right out of my glass? I don't know.
I think it's just like an endless. It's endless open bar.
Oh, okay. So I'm just inhaling it. I'm just in
Yeah, it's
it. I'm
endless open bar.
floating in
Now
it.
I have one friend who doesn't believe that there's cigarettes there when you get there. There's no cigarettes. I kind of think you can just do what, like I'm just hoping for the best. You know what? I'm gonna go out hoping for the best. That like I'm gonna get to see John Lennon perform, and like everything's gonna be cool. I'm gonna see my friends. I'm going to be able to send Megan messages and really mess with her.
Oh boy, I think you'd have fun
To
with
see my
that.
parents. I just think it's going to be cool. So don't worry about it because you love and somebody loves you. So it's all going to be all right.
I'd like to sit down with Vincent van Gogh for sure. I'd like to talk to him. I
Well, just
wonder
make
if he,
sure you're on the right side of him
the
that you
right side of his ear, he'll say, "I'm sorry, honey." Don't talk into my good ear, the one
yeah.
that's not bandaged.
No,
Yeah,
see that's the
yeah.
thing. I don't think where Vincent is, he's got both of them.
So he's healed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be. You would certainly hope that if there really is an afterlife, you would hope that it would be the best possible version for yourself, right? That you wouldn't have the pain that you carried here on Earth.
No. No, and
Yeah.
people say, like I say, when they say, is the place haunted? No, like why would they want to stay there? Think about it. If you know what, I'm gonna get dropped into a little bitty hole up in St. Catharines, but I'm not hanging there. I'm not. I'm out of here, man. I'm gonna you find me sitting on the shore of the River Mersey in Liverpool somewhere, watching that going by, and then maybe I'll check out the Thames for a while, and then after that, maybe I'll come back and I'll mess with Megan. But I'm going somewhere else. I'm not hanging around at St. Catharines. Nothing against anybody up there. I'm just not there. Like I couldn't afford to travel in life. I'm out of here. Bye.
In the afterlife, you're going everywhere,
I'm
right?
going everywhere, and I'm talking to everybody. And the hands are going to be flapping all over.
Well, you're painting a lovely picture, Julie. I will believe. I will
It's
believe.
great.
It sounds
Yeah.
good.
What else do we have, Janine? We have to hang on to something.
That is true. That's right. Something we can control.
We're
So
going to hope for a happy death and a great afterlife.
yes, our interpretation, we can definitely picture whatever the hell we want to picture. And hopefully it doesn't involve hell. That's it.
Maybe that's why God's not going to take me. He's afraid I'll take over and it'll be anarchy, like just partying with Dave Crosby and like you, you get to the gates and like they open up and it's just like, okay, let's go.
The eternal party on the patio for
Yeah, that's
Julie.
it. That's it. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure, Julie. You're always a hoot to talk to. And one thing I will tell you, because I always think of you with the ukulele, I have not been playing mine. And I just
Me neither.
realized the other day it's missing from my life because I used to even just strumming it kind of
Mhm.
brought me a sense of like, playfulness and peace. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of missing that right now. And it's funny, people might think, oh, but you do laughter yoga and comedy. Yes, but I am actually underneath a really serious person and I need to play more. I'm at a stage right now where worry's creeping in too much. So I think I need to strum my ukulele this week for sure.
Look up George Harrison had a very interesting thing to say about ukuleles. He used to buy them and give them to people. And I would have loved to have been the recipient of a ukulele from George Harrison because I'm sure George Harrison wasn't buying, nothing against the Guitar Center up there, but I'm sure he was probably buying Martin ukuleles or really good ukuleles and handing them out. But he said that everybody should have one and that the people he knew that had them were all bonkers. And they were just such a happy little instrument. If you look up the quote, you'll see it. And I really believe that George Harrison was right. You might not get to play it all the time, and I play sadly, badly, and otherwise, but when you do, it does make you happy and it is a great comfort.
Yeah. I think I'm going to strum a little later because I need
Yeah,
it.
get a glass of wine, sit on the porch, and pick your uke.
Pick my uke. Oh, I should take it out in my kayak. Then I could pick my uke and my yak.
Pick your uke and kayak. I say that 3 times fast.
I don't know if I can pick my uke and my yak. Pick my uke and my yak.
Your podcast watchers are probably going to be like, who is she? Where did she come from? What planet? And I'm not even
This is
drinking this. It's seltzer.
Yeah, and I have water right now and I've had coffee. Although, let's see, it's what, 3:25. Not that I would be opposed to a glass of wine at this time, but I haven't yet on a Monday. I'll wait till after 5:30 today.
Yeah,
Well,
whatever.
thank you so much, Julie, for joining me. And for those listening, I will put information into the show notes. And when I share the podcast, that October 1st, October 8th, you can check out the Dunmore Cemetery, the Dearly Departed Players. And Julie has a book signing October October 5th. And then September 30th, she'll be part of that really cool history
Yeah.
festival or fair. I don't know the right word, up at the Viewmont Mall, which is in Scranton/Dixon City there. So I will put all that info there. You have a lot of opportunities to meet Julie and get a copy of her book. And she has many books, actually. So you can get a copy, I'm sure, of your other books as well, right, Julie?
Yep. Yep. I'll have them.
Excellent.
And as always, there is a free gift with purchase. And it's usually pretty good too.
As I mentioned, Julie crochets. She crochets a whole ton of very cool stuff. I have stuff for almost every season because Julie's hands do not sit idle. Let me tell you that. She's always doing something. Well, thank you again so much, Julie. I appreciate you and your time and your approach to life because we need more of that. I totally get that, and it's good for my soul. Thank you. So, to my listeners, I want to thank you for listening as always. And be sure to check out the Dearly Departed Players on Facebook. Take a look in the show notes for my Buy Me a Coffee platform. I always say every week, if you have $5 or something to donate to help keep this podcast afloat, I'm grateful for that. And don't limit yourself to $5. If you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, feel free to donate more. But if you don't have the funds to do so, remember that you can always also support this podcast by sharing it. Tell people about it, share it on your social media. When you're out chatting with someone, say, hey, have you heard of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl? Make a recommendation. That is also great. Write a review or a testimonial on Spotify or Apple Podcast. That would also be appreciated so that others can find it, and that would be great. So, as I say every week, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.